Okay, I think it's going live. We are live. We are live. We have finally got this figured out, I believe. It is Monday, the 17th of February, and it is 11:09 a.m. We're getting off to a little bit of a late start, but we are here nonetheless, and we have a lot of stuff to dive into. Mike, how you doing today? My
I'm
co-host over
doing
here,
good.
Mike.
I'm doing good, my friend. How are you doing? So it's better to be, of course, being on time is better, but it's if you're a little late, it's better than not being there at all. So we're here, so we'll make the most of it.
We're going to make the most of it, and it's interesting because YouTube is they're changing the way that they're doing some of the stuff, so it's interesting nonetheless. But we're going to stay on top of it and be on top of our game, so it's all good.
Yeah,
Let's take a moment to welcome everybody in chat because I really do appreciate everybody hanging out and waiting these 10 minutes here. You want to go say hi to a few of the people, Mike?
definitely. So let me see. Scroll up to the very top here. So I see Gold and Silver versus Crisis and Collapse. Okay, that's an interesting title. We got Robert, Silver Junkie. We got Troxel. We got Jason, Rogue, Silver, Glenn, Patriot, 1776, Dave. And so we've had a couple phone calls. So not sure if you want to start directly off with the phone calls or what do you want to do?
Let's talk for a little bit, and then we can go with the phone calls in a minute, if
Good
that
deal.
sounds like a good plan.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so there's basically, we're going to be talking about the markets and the economy and especially how it relates to the coronavirus because it's still important and it's still a big deal. I've been thinking about this more and I've been looking at some of the stuff and, like, this is just not really, that good at all.
Yeah.
Currently, the CDC just updated the website and they're saying they've got 15 people positive, but they're not counting, and they're saying they're not counting the 14 that were on that flight from the Disney, not Disney, from the Diamond Princess. I don't know how closely you've been following that, but
Not close enough.
the overall point here is that it's going to get really bad in the United States, much worse than in China. And this is point number one that I want to make. And I just want to throw this out there, right? What are the pictures that we see coming out of Wuhan, China? Well, what we see coming out of China are, pictures that are of deserted streets, right? There's nobody on these streets. They're empty. There's people spraying the stuff because of the aerosol risk, but just in general, the streets are vacant in China, right? This is a search that I did, and it's from just this past week, right? So, streets are vacant in China. Then this got me to thinking, they've done a darn good job of keeping people off the streets, right? And then I started thinking about San Francisco, Mike. And what do you think of when you think of San Francisco? Well, let me show you a couple images right here. When I think of San Francisco, here's some of the stuff that I'm thinking of right here. And I don't know if you can see this, but just massive, rampant homeless population, tent cities, people living on the streets, people living in bridges, people living everywhere. So just the question that I have to pose for everybody today is, are we even able to handle it once it comes to the United States in earnest? Because right now there are 8 cases in California. There's none in San Francisco. But, how are you going to quarantine people? How are you going to keep people off the streets? How are you going to keep people from, mingling? Secondly, people that are in these situations anyway, arguably, I'm sure statistically it's proven that they're generally in less health than people that actually have actual permanent housing because you have less access to sanitation and hygiene. Right? Personal hygiene. And we've already seen things about problems like hepatitis A and other problems in California over the years. So just my question to throw out there and just to kick this off is I don't think we're going to be able to handle it when it comes to the United States in earnest, Mike.
Yeah, and so I think that's quite evident in the fact that the political figures are not able to actually handle the crisis in and of itself, which is the homelessness itself. Nevertheless, all the health concerns they're having with just not providing the accurate amount of resources for people to actually use a bathroom in places, as well as the medical care needed for all the people who are addicted to junk, to the drugs and things of that nature. So the problems go a lot deeper in just regards to what we already have as an issue. Nevertheless, any type of new additions that are, that's labeled a global pandemic, nevertheless. So if they can't tend to their business in regards to just taking care of their own citizens, living standard wise, what would make me think that they can actually provide health care for people if they come down with something, and especially of this magnitude. And the next question will be, will the political figures at the end of the day really be that mad if there was to be a problem of that nature that would help? Because they can, in a twisted way, see it as a way of solving some of their issues in a sick and twisted way. So you never know how they're thinking, but they clearly have a problem. They stand to lose their job if they don't solve it. And so what better way to so-called take care of it than letting a natural or bioweapon type of thing do it for them. So yeah, just all things I consider.
Yeah. Good points. Alpine Maximus is saying that the problem is statistically insignificant. I don't know, because where are all the people on the streets going to go? Where are they going to go? Where are you going to put them? I ran a homeless shelter, and a homeless shelter in and of itself, they're like big, huge, well, I don't know where they are and how they are in California, but the one I ran was big, huge bays with bunk beds in them, and it's just open contamination, open season 101 for the spread of this thing. Yeah. Which brings up the other interesting point. So even if, it's statistically insignificant, or even if the government can handle it, and I agree with you that they would take advantage of this chaos and use it to their benefit. Yeah. But even if they can handle it, have you been following the prices at all of N95 masks, Mike?
I have not, unfortunately. What do you have in mind?
I wrote an article this morning, and this is just a little eBay search that I did. Right, how you can filter by completed and what's it called? It's called completed and sold, right? So you click these two little check boxes in your search, and it tells you completed and sold listings. Mike, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 different ones here, and these listings are pages and pages long. There's 5 examples here that sold on the 16th and on the 17th. So today, even people are paying over $100 regularly for a box of 20 masks. 20 disposable masks, $100. Mike, these things were like $20 all day for years, at least. Like you get at least 20 of them for $20 all day. So even if we can handle this crisis that's coming, are we even how are people going to pay for it? How are people going to protect themselves? How is the government going to have enough equipment to deal with all of this issues? Thoughts on any of that, Mike?
So it's an ideal situation because scarcity is obviously apparent. And so from what I've gathered, what I've heard about the medical field here in Michigan is that for a certain hospital around here, they've actually pulled a lot of the N95 masks off the shelves so that staff can't really get hold of them unless there's a breakout, because they didn't want to lose, not have enough to supply their staff or whatnot. So I think there's a lot of people, such as hospitals, that I've already made some adjustments as well. So there will become a high demand for those masks pretty soon, if not already, as we can tell on eBay. So
yes. So that's just point number one. Point number one is just, we are not prepared for this. And when you think of China, I don't think of, hundreds of thousands of people sleeping in the streets in China. I mean, if anything, sure, we talk about slave labor conditions, but they're all inside more or less in these factory, dormitory areas. But just all this that's coming, I don't think we're ready for it. So that's point number one. Point number two, just talking about the panic buying in general. Do you want to check into the chat for a second, though, first?
We can. Let me see here. As always, if you have a quick question or whatnot you want to share with us, feel free to call in and we can try to get you on here. And so it says nobody. So it's always highlight at Silver Doctor so it'll stand out and we'll see it. And let me see here. Nobody has an outright question. A lot of good thoughts out here, but nothing highlighted. So we'll keep going.
Yep. And one person in the chat, I'm pronouncing that wrong, but my wife bought face masks a while ago, paid $18.79 for 20 of them with free shipping. Yeah, look for them now, and they're not there at that price online. I've been scouring all the websites, just for fun more than anything, and like Walmart, nowhere has them online to be delivered. So this brings up the next point, right? Panic buying. So here's an interesting thing that came out of Hong Kong. When I think of Hong Kong, and I hate to bring up like stereotypes and stuff like this, but when I bring up Hong Kong, and where is this? Okay, when I bring up Hong Kong, I think of like a civilized society, right? I think of people, generally speaking, obeying the law and being civil and being cordial and nice to each other. Now, we have to obviously say we're not talking about the riots of the last year. That's a case study in and of itself. We don't even know what's going on with that. But just in general, when you think of Hong Kong, you think of an orderly society, right? Yeah. Well, think about this, right? So here's a little thing right here where it's talking about, in Hong Kong, police had to be called to the scene because 3 armed men held up a truck driver at knife point and stole toilet paper. think about this, Mike. Think about this, right? Like when I go to Costco, first of all, I buy a bag of toilet paper, and I don't know how many rolls are in it, but I think it's at least like 40. I can't remember, but it's so like to say that they stole hundreds of rolls, that's not really even a lot of toilet paper when you think about it. But think about the panic buying when it comes here, right? Do you remember this from last year? Blood, sweat, and tears and poultry. The Popeyes chicken sandwich really worth fighting for. Do you remember this? People were panic buying Popeyes chicken sandwiches last year, and like there was even a fatal stabbing in Maryland. Someone was body slammed in Tennessee. A gun was pulled on somebody in Texas. There was a brawl in New York for Popeyes chicken sandwiches. What's it going to be like when people need protective gear or actual food for their family beyond just a sandwich and other things like that? I mean, it's going to be off the chain here, Mike. Thoughts on any of that?
I'm surprised. I mean, I wonder what's the real narrative behind what they were being told via the media here, with people holding up a truck for toilet paper. So that's different. So I wonder, how severe are things really on the streets? So if you're holding up people for toilet paper, that lets me know that it might be pretty bad. But it's not something we hear about in a different sense on this side of the water. So preparation is key. And so it's a good question here by Low Blood Pressure. It says, what have you guys done since the outbreak differently to prepare? And so that's one thing that I personally I haven't done much outside of what I typically do, which is to basically, the food, the water, shelter, whatnot. I haven't went out scrambling for a mask or whatnot yet. So it's one of the things where I personally, I think there's still a window of time. I'm not sure what that time is. And between now and that time, will this thing die down? Will it ramp up? I'm not 100%, but I'm not panic or out here chasing and running and extremely fearful, put it like that. So that's why I haven't joined the terror of trying to run to the stores and do all that other extra stuff. So that's just not me. But so that's kind of my thing. How about you, Mr. Havdalah?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because it's like I say about studying. If you're studying all along, you don't need to study for the test, right? If you're preparing all along, yes, I have bought a couple extra bags of rice, a couple extra cans of beans, a couple extra bags of beans, and a couple extra things as I've been out and about shopping, just in general. So I've upped it a little bit, but if you have to buy in these panic buying sessions, you're buying at the absolute wrong time. It's already too late at that point. And, the way I described it is because here's the thing, right? Like, if you think about Black Friday and the chaos that goes around there, well, that's without the risk of getting infected with the coronavirus,
Right.
So it's like Black Friday with Black Plague mixed in with it. So this is just not, so you do not want to be going when the panic buying starts. You want to have your provisions, if you can, beforehand, because that's the whole thing that's the whole concept of prepping, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of the things that we're talking about now, just being prepared beforehand, has a lot to do with what we've been talking about for quite some time now, which is the fact that, as somebody mentioned, once the debt itself becomes an issue where they decide to reboot or reset the system, it's going to be the same type of environment, more than likely, of last minute people looking to go out there and buy and just try to get rid of whatever they can to get stuff they need. So this is stuff that if people that are in the prepper community have been doing for some time now, is just basic one-on-one of how to be prepared and not wait to the last minute. So it's one of the things that most of the stuff you need should already be in your possession, apart from a mask or two or things of that nature from a health standpoint. But everything that you need should already be in your possession, technically, if you've been following all this stuff all along. So, yeah.
Yep, great points there. Great way to look at it. So that was just the next point. The next point was just panic buying, because if they're robbing people at gunpoint for toilet or at knife point, I mean, imagine what the robberies are going to look like here in the States. And just as a side note, that's one of those reasons why we're not going to have these autonomous trucks driving all around the States. They're never going to get out of testing, because they're going to sabotage and ransack those like there's no tomorrow, because it's much easier to rob a machine than it is to rob a person.
Yeah, any day. Oh, my goodness.
So you ready to move on to another point here, Mike?
Yeah, we can. As always, nobody's called in yet, so feel free to call in. I want to definitely take those calls in between if we can, but in the meantime, we'll go to our next point.
Okay, here's the next point. Let me see here. So I'm closing these windows here. Okay, let me pull up this. Here we go. Okay, next point. So let's talk about economic ramifications again, because we've been talking about this for a while now. Here we go. So, it's a little title. Tokyo Marathon canceled for 38,000 runners over COVID-19 fears. So this was supposed to be on March 1st. right? So we talk about like, oh, this is going to be done by spring. Well, this wasn't even supposed to be until March 1st. 38,000 runners. Then think of just how many other people are just involved in that one way or another, whether they're fans that are looking, or whether they're working the booths, or whether they're selling stuff, or whether, just in general, that's a temporary boom, right? But that's not going to happen anymore. But that's not the main point. The main point is, what about the Olympics in Tokyo this summer, Mike? They want to cancel the Olympics?
And that's where, like, we're going to really, I think more than likely, if the situation will escalate in the Asian region, so they more than likely will. And the fact is, they've been preparing for the Olympics for, since the last one. So they've been building, I'm sure, and borrowing and all that stuff like that, to where if they don't have that event, there's going to be a lot of angry investors that won't get a return on their investment, and having built infrastructure to hold the Olympic and hold millions of people.
Yes. We look at like Brazil and we look at Greece, and they did horribly after the Olympics because they just ended up losing money because of the debt that they can't pay back. And then last week we were talking about the Chinese that were buying up ahead of the Lunar New Year, the restaurants in particular, and they spent all this money buying stock that now they just can't even get rid of. So imagine all of that malinvestment and bad spending that wouldn't get put to use if they do cancel the Olympics. So I want to put that out there in the chat and ask everybody with maybe a thumbs up or thumbs down in the chat if they think that they're going to cancel the Olympics or not, because that's something that we need to consider, because a marathon is one thing, right, over one day, but the Olympics is 2 weeks long, and it's worldwide activity.
Yeah, now think about this. Another thing is a lot of the funds that go into preparing for those type of events happen to be taxpayer dollars usually, because they sell it to the local politicians as well as to just the people in general that is going to create jobs. And so by us building this new housing facility and arena and stadium, it's going to provide, 20,000 jobs or something like that. They try to spew out. But once again, as you mentioned, a 2-week event. Usually after the events end, those stadiums are bare empty and never used again. So, that's how they sell it to the public, that it's going to bring in jobs. So what about there's no event, there's no jobs?
Yeah, that's right. And then you got all these buildings and stadiums that are going to start falling apart really fast because they're not going to be maintained.
Exactly.
So, these are just things where, we talk about a global slowdown. I mean, if you're going to cancel the Olympics, there's just like no way to avoid that the economy is not adversely affected with all this. Which brings me into the next point about the economy. And that is, and let me bring this up here. So this is from just this morning at 3:12 in the morning. So this is from Reuters, and it says, U.S. firms in China report staff shortages. They say that the coronavirus is hitting global operations. So you remember a couple of weeks ago we were talking, and Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is like, well, we need another few more weeks about this because, we can't see that it's affecting the supply chain at all. Well, here, like almost 50% of the people. So out of 109 companies, 48% of the respondents said plant shutdowns have already impacted their global supply chains. Already impacted, right?
Yeah.
So, the point here is the contagion is real. And, the supply issues are real, and that's only going to get worse as time goes on and as factories are still short-staffed, right?
Yeah.
Which brings up an interesting point that you brought up a couple weeks ago, since we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, which is, well, what about the trade deal? Here's something interesting. Check this out, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, not the very last, but this is in one of the annexes. I don't know if this would be 6 whatever letter, but anyway, this is Article 7.6 miscellaneous. In the event, so this is text right here from, and I'm gonna like put this link in the chat here, but this is hopefully that went through. This is a text here. This is the text from the U.S. government's website of the Phase 1 trade deal, and I'm just going to read this one point. In the event that a natural disaster or other unforeseeable event outside the control of the parties delays a party from timely complying with its obligations under this agreement, the parties shall consult with each other. So consult with each other. So come up with Plan B, right? To the Phase 1 trade deal. Thoughts on any of this, Mike?
So it was not by coincidence that there was a rush to get this Phase 1 done to boost confidence, and it did a great job of boosting markets here in the U.S., and then to have what I believe a planned event in the form of this biological tool that's being used to also be rolled out makes it to where it's a neutral deal. Like, there's no clear winner, especially if it's canceled. But then again, the goal all along I believe, was to get all governments on the same page in this reset or reboot that's underway right now. And since there has been no war, what better way to turn all this into a humanitarian crisis that we need to heal the world, help each other than this type of health situation here. So I wasn't confident in the phase one deal in the first place. So I'm like, what's in it? First of all, to this day, I don't think no one actually seen the full-fledged script from beginning to end of what's in it. And perhaps, this is just way out there, but perhaps there's been some type of or transfer of global power within this deal, which happens to be with this current event we're facing now within that same package, because nobody's seen it. So that's just far out there. But at this point, you never know. So how far is out there when you ask, if you think about it, really?
Yeah. And a couple of points there are, everyone was like, oh, China's already lowering their tariffs on U.S. agriculture. Well, that's because they need food, right? And they need food at a reliable, dependable, and quick way to get it. So that makes sense, because I saw over the weekend, the Chinese government is releasing, it was either like 200 or 2,000 metric tons of pork from its strategic frozen pork reserve, right? So think about that, right? We've talked about that before on the show. The United States has no more strategic grain reserve anymore, right?
Yeah.
So it's just bad all the way around when it comes
to
the
we don't have any reserves of anything. Even Fort Knox is not real reserves anymore. So only thing we have in reserves is just debt units and ledgers of that we owe somebody. So another thing is, one thing that China has also been doing a lot of is stimulating their economy. And so since business has come to a halt there, they have injected, I want to say for sure last Monday, they injected something in its form of, I think 100 billion or something like that, so a relatively large number. And it's good to say, as this situation continues on, they're going to be injecting in more billions, or not trillions, on top of what they've already done. So that's outright propping up of their entire economy. Now, wouldn't that cause concern for the markets overall? Like, I'm sure in their region it's been impacted, but would that necessarily be a boost on our side, or would our markets also be impacted by that? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's collusion one way or another between all the central banks, and people don't like to think about the United States working with China as far as the central bank level, but we got to remember that the yuan is part of the IMF SDR basket of currencies, right? So China is in fact a major player, so I'm sure they're coordinating it all the way around. But that also gets me to thinking that, because the Fed is still engaged in the repo operations, they said that they're going to do whatever they can to keep this expansion going. But sooner or later, people are just going to realize that the markets are so artificial now. They're going to want to get that money out and get the real things that I keep coming back to, because I think it's going to be the real things. So even though they're pumping the money in the system, if it's funny money, I mean, it's just all artificial.
Yeah. I would agree. And so watch this. Here's a thought or question. Looks like from Leanne Blaine in the chat. It says, what would a shock result in the U.S. elections do to the stock market? It says, would it be enough to trigger the long-awaited downturn? And so talking about this political season, as of now, it's kind of baked in the cake. It's mainstream narrative now that Trump is a shoo-in, that there's nobody that can even contest or stand a chance at derailing him from his second term. So if there was something between now and then, and perhaps this health situation could be a reason why things don't turn out as planned, to where that could be a shock. But at this current moment, we've seen so much artificial and upside downness in the markets. I wouldn't be surprised if the thing go higher at a shock of some kind. So
yeah, everybody was like, Trump's going to be bad for the stock market. Stock market goes straight up. So everybody's like, Bernie Sanders would be bad for the stock market. The stock market would probably still go straight up. It doesn't matter. They're just going to keep pumping into it one way or another. But yeah, I mean, definitely, because everybody is thinking that Trump is a shoo-in. And in the alternative media, it's even worse, because they're like, there's not a chance whatsoever. And, I really do think it comes down to the single issue voter. I think that people are going to be putting their vote based on one very specific thing. And I keep seeing all these headlines where single issue voters keep getting, left behind. Like last week, they were talking about the coal industry is imploding, right? But Trump promised to make coal great again. Hillary might be a running candidate with Bloomberg. Well, didn't he promise to lock her up during the 2016 campaign? So that's a single issue voter, right? The Middle East is still hot. It's still not died down. Some rockets hit near the Baghdad embassy again in over the weekend, right? So the bring the troops home people, that's another one. So yes, there could be a shock in the election, and it could shock the markets.
Yeah. Now watch this. I'm not sure. Like, so over the weekend, I did a little video about this past Friday, Cutloff and Trump and the whole administration is looking to really really reaffirm the fact that he's going to try to get the second term by offering a tax cut 2.0. And so I looked at that as like, man, like, isn't it interesting that they're trying to rush in another tax cut, and we're having such a great economy? Like, why would there be a need to cut taxes? And then they added something extra on top of it, talking about a new retirement scheme that allows people to invest in the equities markets outside of their 401k. So they're creating a whole new tool. And I'm thinking like, wow, like if our economy was so good, what would be the need to rush all this through? And I'm like, is this guy trying to bribe the American people? And so that's what it literally feels like to me. It's like he's trying to reaffirm and reassure the fact he's going to win this no matter what. So let me go ahead and dangle a carrot in front of the American people to excite them about more funds in their pocket, and I'll be a shoo-in for sure.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, that's
plus
that's
the infrastructure spend, right? The infrastructure spend in addition to the tax cuts, right?
Yeah. So, oh my goodness.
I think those are all valid points. Someone asked the question, are you guys growing a garden this year? Heck yeah, I'm growing a garden. To me, I'm not really like a green thumb. I mean, I'm good enough to be able to eat the food and not die from eating it, right? But like to me, jalapenos, tomatoes, and cucumbers. I mean, you might think it's funny or whatever, but those are, to me, the easiest things to grow, just personally on a little level, and we've done that with much success over the years. So that's what I'm going to be planting. And then I'm also wanting to put some blackberry bushes up in my yard too. So definitely, like anything that you can do to help give yourself an edge is going to be needed.
Yeah, so my wife got me excited. Not excited, but she's like already threw off some ideas of what she wants to do. So I'm like, yeah, might as well, because usually I never make the time. But I'm like, now might be a time to add that into my preparations of just trying my best to be self-sustainable as best I can, even though it won't do much, but it's better than nothing. So yeah, so this year I might actually do some YouTubing on gardening and stuff like that.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good.
Oh man! So we haven't got a phone call yet. I'm kind of disappointed, man. So if you guys have a thought you want to share, give us a call. Want to definitely get somebody on air, but we'll keep plugging along just in case. Go ahead.
So the Diamond Princess is this cruise ship, right? And I did a little bit of research into it because I wrote a little article about it yesterday, but that set sail from Japan on January 20th. January 20th. So they just evacuated the Americans. And then they got to spend 14 more days in quarantine. And some of them, like 14 of them on the flight, were tested positive on the flight back to the United States. But my point there is that, this is another example of, the U.S. botching the response, right? Because they evacuated people right away out of Wuhan, right? They could have evacuated these people right away and kept them in quarantine in the United States. But no, they waited all the way until the Saturday before. Today was the day everyone was going to start getting tested by the Japanese government from that cruise ship, and then within 3 days they were going to stagger the release of people. So the U.S. government waited all this time until 2 days before they thought they were going to get tested and able to leave the ship, and then they were told, nope, you're coming back to the United States and you're coming back to 14 more days of quarantine. So there you go. This government botching another response.
Yeah, now let me throw out a thought, and let me know your thoughts about this. And so I'm thinking, like, if they're repatriating people back to their country of origin, and they run the risk of being affected or not, and so it's one of those things where could this be a part of the grand plan of bringing people back that more than likely might be impacted or infected with it as a way of either spreading it or I understand how if you're an American in China, you want to get home because you are in the mindset that you're going to get the best care and you want to get home to your family and things like that. But in this instance here, by this being a globally impactful event, would it be wrong to, take people and take them to a geographical location together along with the best medical staff to contain it in one single area as opposed to spread it across the planet and take it back to the other countries? Is that inhumane on my part, or? if I was in there, I probably want to go home too. But for the greater good of humanity, it's like, okay, if I know I'm getting the best care and I'm not going to be able to go home just yet, I'll do it for my country type of thing. Is that too far or what?
No, I don't think so, because, if you're going to be going full stop quarantine, you need to go full stop quarantine, right? Like, they were saying that these, when they get there, they're going into California and then they're moving on to a second destination in the U.S. And we already know there's tons of places all around the U.S. that are set up as quarantine centers. So, I mean, I agree with you, right? Because you would want to ultimately get that within one area so you can truly contain it and put all your efforts and resources into that. But I mean, it's too late, right? It's too late. The cat's out of the bag, as they say.
Yeah. So me, I like to read into everything a little bit, probably too much or too deep. And so I'm thinking like, man, like everybody's been sent home to their place of origin. And, just out of the fact, as we've always mentioned, you mentioned on a big time last week about how we're not prepared for all this. No. And so you have staff, and I think what was the last week you mentioned about the something with the vial to test, or something got out, or some type of mishandling of the event down south, I believe. And I'm thinking like, how many people out of just sheer fear would not provide the best care, given the fact that they don't want to be around it, they don't want to be exposed to it and never have to treat it. So to send them to their local hospitals or something like that for quarantine just only runs the risk of incompetence and fear out of the local people, letting something spill out, and then all of a sudden you got another pandemic in a small city out of nowhere just because they mishandled it and didn't treat it correctly. So those are the risk increases the more that you put it into the public's hands to deal with. So
it's almost kind of like a conscientious objector is what they call them, for people who like are morally opposed to going to war even though they're in the army, which is kind of weird. But like I completely agree with that. If you're a healthcare worker, you're probably thinking right now, my goodness, where is my line in the sand? What do I do? So you got attrition, right? Dropout, fallout. People just saying, you know what? I'm not going to put myself at risk and consequently my family at risk, so I'm done working in healthcare. That's point number one. Then point number two, so you got fallout from that. Then point number two is you're going to be overworking the ones that you have already. So they're going to be stressed and under a lot of strain. That's point number two. And then point number three, and some of those are going to get infected. So you're going to lose even more on net. So yeah, I mean, I want to have some good news, but this is just the reality that we're facing. The good news is that we know it's coming, and if you're healthy and able, you can still prepare for it. That's really the only good news we got.
Yeah. Man, that's something to think about. And that's not necessarily, somebody mentioned about tinfoil. We're not even using tinfoil hats today, but it's one of the things where we're just talking things through in an environment where you never know what could happen. That's why it's like anything can go.
Yeah.
But we do have a call.
Nice.
Let's try to get to this call real quick and see how it goes. Let me open this up. All right, here we go. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, Mike. Hey, Paul. Jason from Pennsylvania calling. How you doing?
Doing good, my friend. How are you doing? What's in your mind?
I'm doing great. Well, hey, I haven't seen the sun in I don't know how long, but it's nice to get some nice weather here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Finally. Talking about how bad it's going to be when all this becomes real. And I wanted to tell a quick story. You just mentioned about teaching yourself to learning how to garden, and I've been doing that myself. And the first coin shop I ever started buying coins from, the gentleman who owned it, his name was Bob. I got to know him and his daughter real well, good people. And he told me this. We're in rural Pennsylvania, okay? Bob says his grandparents lived on a farm in rural Pennsylvania, so they produced most of what they needed. Mm-hmm. And he said that even though they lived through the Great Depression, they never heard about it until they went to town and bought their first television.
Really?
And so my point is, the more you can produce, the less you have to worry about purchasing. So I'm teaching myself to garden, and a lot of places, I'm not going to be able to. In the cities, it's not going to be as easy. But I think that anybody can start gardening and producing what they need. And it's a lot of trial and error. It's not easy. There's going to be a lot of stuff that you plant that does not grow. But like you said, YouTube, it's an amazing resource. There's more videos about gardening than you'll ever watch in your lifetime. So that's my whole point, and I'd like to hear you guys' take on it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, my friend. Thanks for calling in. Great points there. The more you produce, the less you'll be dependent upon having to go buy when stuff hits the fan. So great call. Appreciate you for sharing that.
Yep.
So yeah, that really inspired me more to really take this gardening aspect a little bit more serious, because I've been aware of it, but never just jumped on it directly. So I'm guilty of that. So
yeah, those are all great points. I would say to that, just start really, really small. When I say start really, really small, you don't want to be buying goats and cattle. If you want to really, truly have animals, then get a couple chickens, right? That's pretty much the extent that a person wants to go with animals, because you got eggs plus you got chicken. And then on top of that, with the produce, start small, right? Which is why I do the jalapenos and the tomatoes and the cucumbers, and then just focus on a couple different things, right? You don't need to have this crazy red, yellow, and green pepper and all these like stuff to make just the most gourmet salad in the world. No, you want to just have as much as you can produce at an easy, basic level, because you're not going to be able to get absolutely everything that you need making it yourself in today's times, right? Like I like butter, right? But if I don't have a cow and I don't know how to churn butter, then I'm not getting any butter like that. But if I can grow jalapenos and tomatoes, that's easy. That's something that's very easy for me to do. So absolutely, just start somewhere and start small. That's absolute good advice.
Yeah, good point. And so for those that we got about a little bit over 300, for those that are enjoying the back and forth, enjoying the activity in the chat, don't be afraid to donate a thumbs up, show your support for the channel, and help get the word out there more, because I think, especially this month and head into the spring, there's going to be a lot more people out there looking for a community or looking for other like-minded individuals. And I think, with Silver Doctors, we do a good job of trying to think beyond the mainstream narrative and give people a community where they can feel and bounce ideas off of. So definitely might want to share this video and have more people join the community. So I see a couple highlights here. We'll touch on it. It says, does it... all right, that's and so this is Patriot Rick. It says, does a fat kid love chocolate cake? I got my weight up to 1,000 ounces. Should I step away from the chocolate cake or go for more cake?
I don't think he's talking about his silver weight. And when Mike says get your weight up, he's not talking about eating chocolate cake.
Yeah, for real. So they're usually referring to calories. I'm talking about your physical weight as far as in a financial monetary sense. But that was a good one there. And then low blood pressure says, I heard from Meet the Parents you can milk cats in Detroit. I've heard about that one.
The other thing about this is that you need to focus on what is in your area, right? Like if you live at a lake, then obviously you're not going to be focusing on, raising chickens. No, you're going to be focusing on fish and fish preservation and things like that. Yeah. So also it comes down to where are you and what is it that you have locally as far as your regular resources go.
Yeah, good points there.
So, and, so the overall point that I wanted to make today is just that, there's a lot of stuff that hasn't even been considered yet. Like we see all this stuff out of China, and then I'm just thinking, well, with this massive homeless population that we have in California, and there's 8 cases, and that number is likely to continue just growing and growing. How in the world are we going to deal with it? Because it's a whole different dynamic altogether. So we need to start thinking about these uncomfortable, awkward situations that whatever we see in China and their response to it, our response here is going to be totally different.
Yeah. And so, but here's the thing. You would think that by things breaking out over there and starting there, we referring to our government or whatever, if they truly care, they have more than enough time to truly prepare and basically get the basics, all the masks and all the, the test kits or whatever's needed to not make this a real true countryside breakout. But I don't really sense that they really care, because I believe this is part of a plan anyway it goes. So it's one of the things where if you don't take action, I wouldn't rely upon those that, representatives of us to do it for us. So it's one of the things where literally you might just be on your own in a sense, because the healthcare won't really be there. And on top of that, most people are oblivious to what's going on. I bet you there's a good portion of the population who have no clue as to what this biological tool is, COVID-19. They might not even know what that is. And then why do they rebrand the name? So I'm just, from a medical terms or whatnot. So yeah, a lot of people still in the dark, I'm sure.
Last thing, and this isn't really a topic, but I do have to put on my tinfoil real quick. So
okay, go ahead, do that.
Put on my tinfoil.
Yeah, go ahead. Might as well.
Here we go.
If I need to put mine on, I'll put mine on too.
There you go. So here's my tinfoil hat. Mike, how come there's not a single case in Mexico yet? There's not a single case in Mexico, or anywhere in Latin America for that matter. Then here's my next question. What happens if there are cases in Mexico? Is Trump going to say, well, let's just close down that land border with Mexico? All right, taking this off now. Taking this off.
So my initial thoughts would be that the wall it should be complete by now, or I haven't heard much about it. So, I've always mentioned that the wall is designed to keep U.S. citizens in, not necessarily foreigners out. And so it could serve its purpose to block people from coming in. But what about there were no cases in Mexico and beyond, and people were trying to get out of the U.S. and they were not allowed to go via, car or by foot. And then all of a sudden, flights stop flying domestically in and out of our country here, to where you're kind of stuck in this country. And if this thing really breaks out, you're not able to go anywhere, probably be able to go north, up to Canada or whatever. But if things get bad here, there will be no way out of this country or in, more than likely.
Yeah. And then just one step further, and I need to put the tinfoil on again, but I'm just not going to put it on right now. Then the whole bring the troops home. So what happens? We've been talking about martial law big time on Friday. You bring the troops home, and then they're pointed inwards. They're not pointed outwards anymore. So anyway, that's all I got for today, Mike. So I want you to sign us off with something positive, and I'll let you have the final words.
Something positive. I always have to go back to the core essence of everything. We have the natural side of things that we're witnessing. We have the practical, which are things that you can do yourself. And then underneath and surrounding all that is the spiritual side of things. So outside of this information we shared about the gardening and mask and the preparation steps you've already should have been doing in preparation for a monetary situation, we never factor in a health scare. So preparation wise, everything should be good to go. But spiritual sense, we need to pray for one another and pray for our leadership in this country and hope that, God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. That's all I can say. So I'm gonna leave it right there, but it's been great hanging out. Be blessed, be safe. See you guys later. Peace.